Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. Here today we are going to discuss the topic theater of the absurd. Before I begin discussing this term or this literary movement in terms of its historical context, its major playwrights, and many other aspects of this term, theater of the absurd, I would like to draw your attention towards the fact that this literary movement, theater of the absurd, was not a conscious movement. What I means to say here is that this term, theater of the absurd, or this movement was not under any organized school of playwrights. It was there were certain plays which were written in late 1950s and the early 1960s, and the writers were also writing independently before influencing each other. And it was this man, this critic, Martin Eslin, who was from Hungary. It was he who coined this term, theater of the absurd, in his book with the same title, Theater of the Absurd, which was published in 1962. It was this man who coined this term, theater of the absurd. And in this book, he attempted to identify and classify this new trend in drama. What was this new trend in drama? This new trend in drama was that there were certain playwrights in the 1950s, the early 1960s, who were writing to articulate their sense of bewilderment, their sense of anxiety, and their wonder in the face of this inexplicable, incomprehensible universe. In simple terms, if I say that they were expressing the feeling of meaninglessness, uselessness, as I should add here that this was the time after the two world wars. So after the two world wars, there was a sense of bewilderment, anxiety, which we will discuss in detail in the coming slides. For just beginning, you should keep in mind that absurd, this term was coined by Martin Eslin, and it was this critic who classified and loosely grouped this playwrights under this label, theater of the absurd. And this was came a proper typical existence. So, and now the question arises and they were loved by this critic Martin Eslin. But what was the idea? What was the philosophy on which this movement was based upon? So the philosophy, this drama, these plays which were presented on the stage, they were actually the philosophy given or explicated by this French philosopher Albert Camus. Albert Camus wrote an essay in 1942 entitled Myth of Sisyphus. So in this essay, Albert Camus, we can say, propounded a philosophy of absurd, an idea of absurd. So it was this idea which was written, idea of later practiced by certain playwrights, and then in 1962 it was labeled, it was compiled, certain playwrights were compiled who were practicing this theater by Eslin. So Camus, the philosophy was given by Camus philosophy, he explained in this essay the myth of Sisyphus. And what is this myth of Sisyphus? This myth of Sisyphus was based upon this Greek fable, and I hope you are familiar with this myth of Sisyphus. Then too, I would like to discuss briefly what was this myth. This myth is drawn from Greek fable. According to this fable, there is a character whose name is Sisyphus, and he is punished and condemned by gods to roll a rock up a mountain, only to find to roll back down due to its weight. Under its weight, it will definitely go down, and due to the gravitational force. So this activity, this Sisyphus is doing for eternity. He was punished to do such a futile activity. The activity was to roll a rock up a mountain, and only to find the rock tumbling back down under its weight, and due to some forces. So this was the activity Sisyphus is doing, and he was punished to do such useless, futile, and meaningless activity. So here, Camus compared this condition of Sisyphus with the human condition. We human have drive and longing for searching or for finding meaning in life, meaning and order in life. And but what happens with us in order you should think according to the time zone. 1950s and 60s after the two world wars. So it was the time when the feeling of anxiety, purposelessness were rampant. So coming back to the myth of Sisyphus, so here Camus compared the human condition of longing, of deriving meaning from life is absurd itself, because according to him, it's inherently futile. Human existence is basically meaningless. So some of the philosophy of Camus, but at the end of the essay, Camus offers, or Camus seems to offer a resolution to this problem. What he seems to say at the end of this essay, he says that we should assume that Sisyphus is happy. So here, Camus seems to say us or tell us that we should learn from Sisyphus, that Sisyphus, though he is engaged in such a futile activity, but rather than, or instead of giving up or committing suicide or creating some elusive world for himself, he recognized fully the pointlessness and futility of his task. He recognized it fully and embraced this absurdity of his task with whole heart. And this Sisyphus' happy statement, we should emulate. We should, as our existence or our problems of searching meaning in this life are also similar to this, first by embracing absurd. We should understand this. So idea of absurd was given by Camus, and what he says that the only solution is to embrace, to understand the absurd, that life is absurd, and this understanding is the only solution and the first of being fully alive. So say this was the philosophy given by Camus, the French philosopher. So what he says, acceptance of the absurd existence, human existence is the only solution, rather than committing suicide or creating some fantasy world is not a solution, or not is not the way to come out from the absurd life. So this whole philosophy of this theater of absurd was based upon. So this overall, I can say that idea of absurd was proposed. And then coming back to Martin Esslin, who belonged to Hungary, who these playwrights by noticing the in their plays. What he did, he considered four major playwrights, the leaders of this movement. These four major playwrights were Samuel Beckett, Eugene Ionesco, Arthur Adamov, Jean Janet, and late Harold Pinter was and is by Stoppard, Harold Albee, Jean Cardew were also classified as belonging to this theater of the absurd. Now, one interesting thing I would like to tell you that the interesting thing was that these writers of these playwrights were not comfortable with this term, theater of the absurd. They preferred more to call their techniques and practices termed as anti-theater or new theater.
क्या हुआ?
Hello.
Hello.
Ma'am, my screen has gone. I can share it again.
Please do it.
Can, huh. Yes.
टिल्ट करो.
So we were discussing, ma'am.
ठीक है.
Is it okay, ma'am?
हाँ, okay, carry on.
Okay. We were discussing that these are not comfortable with this term. They more to call themselves to belonging to anti-theater or new theater, as they were practicing or they were experimenting with the techniques of theater in order to show their bewilderment or the absurd existence which they were leading. Next, now I hope that some of the context, some of the things are clear to you, have clear to you related to theater of the absurd. But now very obvious question arises that if these writers or playwrights were writing independently, then how divides audio? Ma'am, screen is gone again. I don't know what's
The
wrong.
interruption is deeply regretted. There is some kind of interruption. Please bear with us. Shortly, the officer will be back. The resource person will be back. Please bear with us.
Ma'am, don't know, screen is again screen is fading away. Is
उसको
it
सीधा
okay,
करो फोन को.
ma'am?
Yes, it is okay. Carry on.
Don't know why screen will. Okay, I'm resuming the lecture.
Carry on.
So
Carry on. आप visible हो. बोलो.
there is interruption of voice. Okay. So we were discussing that the very question arises that the writers or playwrights were, it was not a conscious movement. So writers and playwrights were writing independently from each other. Then how they produce the same kind of, or the writings which were very much similar in their treatment of theme, in their subject matter, and in the rejection of the conventions of the traditional theater. Traditional theater, they flouted the conventions of traditional theater. So it's not a this, it was all in the timing, and the timing was the post-war period. It was the period of after the two world wars. That's why the treatment of theme, the subject matter, the psyche.
Hello. Please bear with us once again. There is some kind of trouble with the resource person's work. Dr. Rupali would shortly be online once again. In the meantime, I carry on. So what I want to tell you, she is anchoring the thought that the theater of the absurd was a kind of movement that came as a revolt against the existing trend of formality, of a purposefulness in action. Ma'am Rupali ji is back again. She'll carry on.
Ma'am, this screen is fading away again and again.
आप करो please. आपके
Am I audible?
सिस्टम में गड़बड़ है. हाँ, आप करो. You are audible. Carry on.
Okay.
Or if you
So
want me
it was
to do it,
it was an era of spiritual.
Do it.
Ma'am, please, can you share this? Okay.
I have no
So
screen to share. I
was
can only
often
deliver a lecture. करो, carry on.
okay. So post-war period, it was considered as an era of spiritual emptiness, and after the havoc created by the two world wars, the people were compelled to think that the world is a frightening and illogical place, which has become absurd, totally absurd and meaningless. So these were the impact of havoc created by two world wars, when people felt themselves empty, because it was the main reason was that the existing traditions or existing their ideas and values and principles in which they believed, they were badly shaken after happening of these two world wars. So after this trauma of living, if I would say trauma of living or trauma over their psyche, when they become face to face, when they were unable to find any center towards which they look upon. So in such a situation, it was a totally a frightening and illogical place. It was totally a chaotic atmosphere. And in such a chaotic atmosphere, the writers, playwrights, and the artists, they compelled, in chaotic atmosphere, compelled them to think about the absurdity of their existence and about certain technique through which they can communicate to the societal situation, to this trauma of living. And the world was and as everybody knows that after the World War II, also the world was under constant threat of nuclear annihilation. So such was the condition of such was the atmosphere of fear, anxiety, and bafflement, that the people were thinking. So people were having a feeling of loss, purposelessness, and bewilderment in their um, dealings and treatment. So that's why it was, we can say, theater of the absurd came into existence due to the World War, after the havocs created by World War II. Or World War II acted as a catalyst in making this absurdist theater on stage. So on the whole, we can say that theater of absurd, this term theater of absurd, is used to characterize or is used to describe the works of a number of European and American dramatists who were writing the plays in late 1950s and the early 1960s. And if we read the statements written on the slide, that after Holocaust and World War II, world appeared chaotic and meaningless. New genre emerged in France, as we know that new genre of this ideal absurd work from France, from French philosopher Albert Camus. And here you should notice that this word absurd is, in terms of absurd, is the meaning of this word absurd between its literal sense. Literally, what we mean by absurd, which is ridiculous. But in the context of absurdist theater, we should take its meaning that it is something, absurd means something out of harmony, something out of sync. Man is in a state of limbo, and man finds everything in chaotic state, in incoherence. He is in out of sync, and he is out of sync with himself, with each other, and with his surroundings. So such was the meaning of absurd at that time. And the meaning and insights taken from this are still it also been said that absurd theater, when you read or when you witness the play, this term theater of the absurd, you will find that you are not going to get any answer, and at the end of the you are the certain disjointed, baffled feeling, because as usual we find in other plays, we find a very in other plays what we find a feeling of contentment, we find a feeling of catharsis, or we find a feeling of getting certain insights and newer perspectives about life. But in this theater absurd, you will find that life is absolutely absurd and there is no solution for this. So these plays were meant for providing solutions to the masses. Rather, their purpose was purposeless. So there was no find what is this is for. There is no end, beginning, or middle, which we'll discuss in the features of absurdist plays shortly. So it was raising questions. It left man in a more chaotic psyche. But why it was much popular at that time? Because at time people were able to connect with them very instantly, because people were also in the same condition. They were finding meaninglessness, purposeless in their existence, and the portrayal in the same psychical machinations they found in theater of the absurd. And the last one, that expressed an inability to make sense of human actions, choices, and life itself. So overall, theater of the absurd advocated the idea absurd that life has no inherent meaning, human existence is meaningless or purposeless, and it was in the context, in the special context of the period which happened after the World War II. And if we go by the definition given by Merriam-Webster Dictionary, then it goes thus, and I hope it makes the meaning more clear. It says, theater that seeks to represent the absurdity of human existence in a meaningless universe by bizarre or fantastic means. So this was the definition, or this is the definition of absurdist theater. And in order to understand, or for the better understanding, taken this play, Waiting for Godot, and I hope that you have heard this name, and it is the one of the best known plays under this umbrella, Theatre of the Absurd, which is written by Sam Beckett, one of the chief practitioners of this practice, this device, absurdist theatre. So the major features of absurdist plot are written on the screen, which are absence, emptiness, nothingness, unresolved, and mysteries. And if you see this play Waiting for Godot, then it revolves around the two main characters, who are Vladimir and Estragon, who spend the entire plot in waiting for someone whose name is Godot. So this is the plot. This is the storyline, or we can say not at all any story. They were just waiting. So we can say, we can easily notice that in absurdist plays, there is they assume a dreamlike stature, where plays are operating not in terms of action, no action taking place, rather it's more images or portrayal of the baffled, disjointed state of human psyche. And if I take this first trait, absence, then the whole plot centers around the absence of the character whose name is Godot, for whom these Vladimir and Esteban are waiting. So whole plot is revolving around the absence of that one of the characters who is much long time awaited. And mysteries, there's emptiness, nothingness, as I said, there is no meaning, purpose, and there's no not much action. Mysteries, there is always a fear of something, force. There's always this menacing fear, it is threatening. So in almost all the plays you will find some menacing outside force, which threatens, due to which people always leave, or the characters of the play live in a constant threat or fear or anxiety. This is much the time zone, with the scenario or the scenery of the scene of the time after 2 world wars. And the plot is cyclic. Cyclic, what I say, and this cyclic plot we can witness in the play by the same playwright, Endgame. Cyclic is that the play ends from where the play begins. The such types of plot we can see, we can find in absurdist play, which draws our attention towards the absurdity of life or the meaninglessness of human existence. And if you see this chart, then in this chart you can see, if we see at first plot, then plots are such where we don't find any real story. Glimpse such feature that there is an absence of real story. It is not in a typical traditional plays which has a proper beginning, middle, and which has a line and effect. The absurdist theater also misses this cause and effect relationship. Cause and effect relationship, in order to give a link to the next scene. There's no cause and effect. Everything keeps going in routine and repetitions. There are many repetitions you will find, keeps on going in routine, totally absurd. So the plot, there is flow and find traditional. So this theater, or we can say subverted the the conventions of traditional theater. And dialogue, if I take what type of language communication they opted for, then the language was such that we find many cliches and repetitive phrases in the language. This such type of language which has no sense, or certain repetition, the same phrases being repeated again and again. And why they did so? They did so deliberately in order to show that language has lost its denotative meaning. It has no meaning at all, and language ends up in language ends up, if that language is used at that time, the time you should keep in mind. Language at that time, if any language is used, any proper language is used, then it ends up in creating misunderstanding among the creators. Now you will say that why the picture is not much clear. Then you should think about the time of the post-war world. This such experience, such traumatic experience was experienced by those people very first time. They have not seen such chaos, um, uh, devastation, such destruction in their life. So it was a very, so they failed in articulating this havoc, this devastation in language. That's why we always find that the traumatic effect of psyche, and they lost the language. Language fails to articulate their psychic expressions. And there are many other things that they find rootlessness, as it is very much related to absurd, and there is a vagueness. There is no time, place, and characters in absurdist play. Why? Because according to absurdist, the practitioners of absurd theater, they consider that life has no past or no future. There is only repetition of present. So such was the theme or features or practices or techniques of theater of the absurd. You can find it more. You can take screenshot of this chart. It will help you in having all the features in one glance of absurdist theater. And this is a list of some of the major playwrights which to the absurdist theaters, and which I encourage you to go through. But I recommend these playwrights you to read with the caveat. The caveat is that you are not going, as you might have, you can sense that until now, after this discussion, that you are not going to get any positive insight or some new perspectives about life. You are going to get a very absurdist feeling, and this feeling after when you end up the reading of these all plays, you are not going to find a very contentment type of feeling. You will find that was the purpose, to highlight, to remind the man about the absurdity of his very life, which is very meaningless and useless in the special context of that time. So this was the philosophy, the theory, or the practices of this theater of absurd movement, or we can say term. And when you read these plays, you will find these features getting more palpable and noticeable. So that's all for today. And with this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you for your attention.